Wife goes missing. During honeymoon, then her husband zooms in on the wedding photo. Ethan Mercer's wife vanished during their dream honeymoon, just days after their wedding, disappearing without a trace or explanation. But when her husband zooms in on one of their wedding photos, he uncovers something shocking that changes everything. Ethan slumped in the uncomfortable metal chair, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. This was his third interview at the Queenstown police station in the past 24 hours. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the stark interview room. Across from him sat Detective Inspector Grant Wilson, leading the investigation, flanked by 2 officers from the regional South Island police force. "Mr. Mercer," Detective Wilson began, his voice calm but tinged with exhaustion. "I know. We've been over this multiple times, but we need to revisit the timeline again. Every detail could be critical vital, especially now that the South Island police force has joined the investigation." Ethan nodded, rubbing his face with his palms. "I understand. Whatever helps find Celeste. Walk us through yesterday." "Again," Wilson prompted. "What time did you last see your wife?" Ethan took a deep breath. "It was around 6:30 a.m. We were staying at Lake Haven Retreat, that luxury resort by Lake Wakatipu. Celeste had planned to attend the sunrise yoga session at 6:45 by the lake. She kissed me goodbye while I was still half asleep." He paused, the memory of her soft lips on his forehead now a dagger twisting in his chest. "And what were your plans for that day?" prompted Officer Janine Kelly, one of the regional officers. "We had booked flight boarding on Lake Wakatipu for 10 a.m., followed by cliff jumping in the afternoon. Celeste was really excited about both. She loves adventure sports," Ethan said, his voice cracking on the present tense. "After yoga, she was supposed to have a massage and facial at the hotel spa at 8 a.m. She was meant to be back in our room by 9:30 for breakfast." "And when did you realize something was wrong?" Detective Wilson asked, jotting notes in a small black notebook. "Around 10 a.m. when she hadn't returned. I waited another hour, thinking maybe the spa treatments were running late. I tried calling her around 11 but then I realized her phone was still in our room," Ethan said, gesturing helplessly. "That's when I started to worry. Celeste never goes anywhere without her phone. I went down to the front desk, asked about her. The staff checked with the spa, but they said she never showed up for her appointment." "What did you do next?" Officer Kelly asked. "I asked them to help me search the resort. Staff checked everywhere, restaurants, gardens, the beach, the gym. By 1 p.m., we couldn't find her anywhere, so I came here to report her missing." Detective Wilson nodded, flipping through his notes. "Mr. Mercer, we've made some progress in the investigation today. We've questioned all hotel staff and several guests. We've also reviewed the CCTV footage from the resort." Ethan sat up straighter. "And?" "We can confirm your wife attended the yoga session at 6:45 a.m. Multiple witnesses saw her there. Cameras then captured her walking toward the spa between 7:50 and 8:15 a.m. "So she was heading for her appointment," Ethan said. "But the spa said she never arrived," Wilson continued. "That's correct," Officer Kelly interjected. "The footage shows something else. Your wife was approached by a man in a staff uniform before she reached the spa. They appeared to have a conversation, and then they walked away together." Ethan's heart raced. "What? Who was he? One of the hotel staff?" Detective Wilson shook his head. "That's where things get concerning. We've checked with management. This individual doesn't appear on any staff roster. No one recognizes him." "Then he must have kidnapped her?" Ethan slammed his palm on the table. "Have you found where he took her? Did anyone see anything?" "We've checked all available footage," the third officer explained. "The man and your wife exited the hotel and walked onto the street. No signs of struggle or distress. No one, staff or guests, reported hearing anyone asking for help or seeing anything unusual." "So you're saying my wife just voluntarily walked off with a stranger?" Ethan couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. Detective Wilson cleared his throat. "We're not drawing conclusions yet. But there's something else you should... No. We spoke with the yoga instructor, Mr. Patel. He mentioned that your wife made an unusual comment during the session. What comment? He says she mentioned she'd be free of everything soon. Mr. Patel didn't think much of it at the time, assumed she was talking about feeling free after yoga. But given the circumstances... Ethan shook his head vehemently. No, that's absurd. Celeste wouldn't just leave. We just got married 2 weeks ago. This is our honeymoon, for God's sake. His voice echoed off the bare walls of the interview room. Mr. Mercer, please, Detective Wilson said calmly. We're not suggesting anything. We're simply gathering all possible information. Ethan fought to regain his composure. So, what about this man? Where did they go? Did the cameras follow them? They didn't go to the parking lot, Officer Kelly explained. They walked onto Shotover Street. We've been checking street cameras and asking local businesses for footage. We managed to track them for about 2 blocks before losing them. And you still haven't found her? Ethan's voice was strained. Detective Wilson shook his head. Queenstown is relatively quiet this time of year, but we've been asking locals, shop owners, restaurant staff. No one recalls seeing them. We've expanded our search radius today, but haven't had any significant leads yet. So what now? Ethan asked, desperation evident in his voice. We've called in additional resources from the regional police, Detective Wilson explained. Tomorrow, we'll widen our search perimeter around Queenstown. We've also alerted Border Control and Sea Patrol for the entire South Island, as well as immigration authorities and North Island crossings. If someone is trying to take her off the island, we'll know. Ethan nodded slowly, trying to process everything. 5 days into their honeymoon, and his wife had vanished without a trace. Nothing made sense anymore. Is there anything else? You can tell us, Mr. Mercer. Anything unusual about your wife's behavior recently? Any concerns she expressed? Ethan shook his head. No, nothing. She was happy. We were happy. He wiped a hand across his face, exhaustion setting in. This is supposed to be the happiest time of our lives. Detective Wilson closed his notebook. We'll continue our investigation first thing tomorrow morning. Try to get some rest. Mr. Mercer, we'll drive you back to the hotel. As they led him out to the police car, Ethan cast his gaze across the starlit waters of Lake Wakatipu, wondering where in this beautiful, vast wilderness his wife could be. The thought that she might be in danger, scared and alone, was unbearable. Please, he whispered to the officers as they reached the car. Just please find her. Back in the honeymoon suite at Lake Haven Retreat, Ethan shut the door and slumped against it, the day's burdens pressing heavily on him. The room, once a haven with its sweeping views of the mountains and lake and a luxurious king-sized bed, now felt like a mausoleum to happiness cruelly taken. Celeste's open suitcase lay on the luggage rack, her clothes meticulously folded inside, a painful reminder of her absence. Her nightgown was still draped over the armchair where she'd left it yesterday morning, her slippers beside the bed, precisely where she'd stepped out of them before heading to yoga. Ethan moved to the bed and sank onto it, his body heavy. With exhaustion, he should try to sleep. Tomorrow would bring another round of questioning, another day of searching. But his mind raced, replaying every moment of the past weeks, searching for some clue, some sign he might have missed. He changed into pajama bottoms and a t-shirt, then lay back on the king-sized bed, the empty space beside him a void screaming with silence. They'd only been married for 2 weeks. How could this be happening? Rubbing his eyes, Ethan tried to quiet his thoughts. Something felt wrong about all of this. Not just the disappearance itself, which was surreal enough, but something in the details nagged at him. The mysterious staff member who wasn't on the hotel roster, the strange comment about being free. None of it aligned with the Celeste he knew. Rolling to his side, he spotted Celeste's phone on the nightstand, where the police had returned it to him after their examination. He'd argued that he should keep it in case Celeste tried to reach out or someone called with information about her. After some negotiation and a thorough forensic check, they'd agreed, but only for the first 72 hours, after which it would need to be reassessed. Ethan reached for the device. The screen lit up, revealing a flurry of notifications. Missed calls from friends, text messages asking about their honeymoon, social media alerts, but nothing related to her disappearance. He hadn't told anyone yet. Not his parents, not her family. It had only been a day, and part of him still clung to the hope that there was a simple explanation, that she would walk through the door any minute with an apologetic smile. As he set the phone back down, his own phone pinged with a new email notification. Picking it up, he saw the sender was Claire Madison, their wedding organizer. The edited photos from your special day are ready. Find them in the attached Google Drive folder. It was an absolute honor to be part of such a beautiful celebration of love. Ethan hesitated for a moment before tapping the link. Claire had mentioned the photos would be ready 7 or 10 days after the wedding. Part of him wasn't sure he could bear to look at them now, with Celeste missing, but another part needed to see her face, to remember the joy they'd shared. The folder loaded, revealing about 50 professionally edited photos. Ethan began swiping through them, each image a perfect capture of what had been the happiest day of his life. The ceremony at the countryside estate in the Cotswolds, the golden sunlight filtering through ancient oak trees, Celeste's family and friends who had flown all the way from the U.S. mingling with his British relatives. "Where are you, honey?" he murmured to himself as he flipped through image after image. There was Celeste in her gown, a vision that had taken his breath away. There they were, exchanging vows, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. Their first kiss as husband and wife, the cutting of the cake, their first dance. He continued swiping until he came to one of his favorites, a shot of them walking back down the aisle after being pronounced husband and wife. The photo captured them perfectly, radiant with happiness, holding hands as their guests stood on either side of the aisle, applauding. Colorful bunting hung overhead against the brilliant blue sky, and the lush greenery of the Cotswolds estate provided a perfect backdrop. Ethan zoomed in on their faces, smiling at the memory. Then, almost absently, he began panning around the image, taking in the guests' joyful expressions when something caught his eye in the background. He zoomed in further on a figure standing toward the rear of the gathering. The blood drained from his face. While everyone else in the photo was clapping and smiling, focusing on the newlyweds, this man stood rigid, arms at his sides, face serious, almost cold, as he stared directly at Celeste. "Alexander Vale," Ethan whispered, his voice hollow in the empty room. It was unmistakably Celeste's ex-husband, the man they had not invited, the man who had no business being at their wedding, the man who had spent months harassing and threatening Celeste, after she left him, until they'd finally reached an arrangement. Celeste wouldn't reveal what she knew about his corrupt business dealings if he left them alone, and he had, or so they'd thought. Ethan sat bolt upright on the bed, his heart pounding. Alexander Vale had been at their wedding, watching from the shadows, and now, 2 weeks later, Celeste was missing. It couldn't be a coincidence. Ethan jumped off the bed, his exhaustion instantly replaced by adrenaline. He quickly downloaded the wedding photo to his phone, determined to show it to the police first thing in the morning. No, scratch that. He would call Detective Wilson right now. His fingers shook as he scrolled through his contacts for the detective's number. Just as he was about to tap call, his phone lit up with an incoming call from an unknown number. Ethan stared at it. For a second, then answered. "Hello?" "Ethan." The voice on the other end made his heart stop. It was Celeste. "Celeste, where are you? Are you okay? I've been out of my mind." "I'm fine, Ethan." Her voice sounded flat, distant, not at all like the warm, vibrant woman he'd married. "I'm so sorry for doing it this way." "Doing what?" "Celeste, what's happening? Are you in danger?" Just tell me where you are, and I'll come get you." There was a pause before she continued. "On our honeymoon, I've had time to think about everything, about us, and I don't think this is going to work out." Ethan felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. "What are you talking about? We have different interests, different lives. Getting married, it was a mistake. I need some time alone to figure things out. That's why I left. But now I realize everyone is searching for me, and I don't want that. I'm not in danger, Ethan. I just need space." Ethan sank back onto the bed, struggling to process what he was hearing. "Is this about your job? About moving to England with me? Because we can work that out. We can find a solution." "Yes, that's part of it," she interjected. "But there's more. I just don't feel like we're suitable for each other in the long run. We promised to be with each other until death, and I don't think that's possible for us. Celeste, this isn't you. This isn't making any sense. Is someone forcing you to say this? Blink twice if—" He stopped himself, realizing the absurdity of asking someone to blink over a phone call. "Just tell me where you are." "I have to go now," she said, her voice suddenly hurried. "I'm sorry, Ethan. Please, just move on from me." "Celeste, wait." But the line went dead. Damn it. Ethan hurled his phone onto the bed, a guttural sound of frustration tearing from his throat. He paced the room, trying to make sense of what had just happened. That hadn't sounded like Celeste. Not really. Her words, perhaps, but not her. Voice, not her spirit. The Celeste he knew wouldn't just walk away from their marriage after 2 weeks without even a face-to-face conversation. They'd been together for 3 years before the wedding. They'd weathered storms together, including the harassment from Alexander Vale. And then a detail hit him that made him stop in his tracks. Celeste's phone was still here, on the nightstand. If she had left voluntarily, with all those reasons she'd mentioned, why would she leave her phone behind? Was she truly trying to abandon her old life? That made no sense. Despite the financial challenges her family faced, Celeste had always spoken warmly of them. She would never just cut them off without a word. And what about the man in the staff, uniform who had approached her at the hotel? If Celeste had planned to leave on her own, why the elaborate charade with a fake staff member? Then there was Alexander Vale, uninvited at their wedding, watching Celeste like a hawk. None of it added up. Ethan grabbed his phone again and quickly changed into jeans and a sweater. He needed to get back to the police station to show them the wedding photo, to tell them about the call. As he left his room and waited for the elevator, his phone rang again. This time it was Detective Wilson. "Mr. Mercer, I need to inform you that your wife has just contacted us." "I know," Ethan said quickly. "She called me too, but, Detective, something's not right. That wasn't really her. I mean, it was her voice, but not her words. And I found something else. Alexander Vale, her ex-husband, was at our wedding, uninvited. I have a photo." "Mr. Mercer," the detective interrupted, his tone professional but gentle. "We traced the call immediately and dispatched an officer to check on your wife. She's staying at a serviced apartment by herself. The officer spoke with her personally. She confirmed she left of her own volition and is not in any danger." Ethan felt as if the floor beneath him had disappeared. "What? No, that can't be right. Where is she? I need to see her." "I'm afraid I can't disclose that information. Your wife has specifically requested privacy, and since there's no crime involved, we have to respect her wishes." "You can't just close the investigation like that." Ethan's voice rose, drawing a curious glance from an elderly couple waiting for the elevator. "Mr. Mercer, there's nothing more we can do. If your wife has chosen to leave, this is now a personal matter between you and her." The detective's voice softened slightly. "If I may offer some personal advice, newlywed couples often get caught up in the excitement of the wedding without fully considering how their lives will change afterward. Perhaps give her some time to process things." Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. "This is insane. My wife wouldn't just leave like this. Something else is going on. I understand this is difficult, Detective Wilson said, but the case is closed. Good night, Mr. Mercer. The line went dead, leaving Ethan standing in the hallway, phone clutched in his hand, completely alone. Ethan returned to the suite, slamming the door behind him with enough force to rattle the framed artwork on the walls. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the bewildering turn of events. The police had closed the case. Celeste had supposedly told them, and him, that she'd left voluntarily, that their marriage was a mistake. But every fiber of Ethan's being rejected this explanation. It didn't align with the woman he'd fallen in love with, the woman who had stood before their families and friends just 2 weeks ago and promised to share her life with him. He paced the room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. If the police wouldn't help him, he would have to figure this out himself. Ethan's thoughts kept returning to Alexander Vale. The man's presence at their wedding couldn't be a coincidence, not when Celeste disappeared just 2 weeks later. He remembered vividly the first few months after he and Celeste had become a couple. Alexander had been relentless, threatening phone calls, showing up at her workplace, even following her home one night. The man had been obsessed, unable to accept that Celeste had left him, but they'd found leverage through her work at Vale's investment firm. Celeste had discovered evidence of corruption and money laundering. They'd struck a deal. Alexander would leave them alone, and they would keep quiet about what they knew. It had worked, or seemed to. Alexander had backed off, and they had kept their end of the bargain. For 3 years, they hadn't heard a word from him. They'd built their life together, planned their wedding, looked toward their future. Ethan sat down at the desk in the suite and pulled out his tablet. If Alexander Vale was behind Celeste's disappearance, there might be clues to his whereabouts that could lead Ethan to his wife. He began searching for any recent news about Alexander. What he found confirmed his suspicions. Despite their silence about his illegal activities, someone else had eventually blown the whistle. Last year, a former business partner had turned state's evidence in exchange for immunity. Alexander had faced significant fallout. He'd lost several properties, a substantial portion of his company, and his reputation had been publicly tarnished. Remarkably, though, he'd managed to avoid jail time, likely through expensive lawyers and carefully hidden evidence. Ethan dug deeper. If Alexander still had property in New Zealand, that could be where he was keeping Celeste. He searched property, records, corporate filings, anything that might reveal a connection. After an hour of intensive searching, Ethan found what he was looking for: a listing for a property in Queenstown, purchased through a shell company that he was able to trace back to one of Alexander's remaining holdings. The address was in a secluded area, about 20 minutes from the Lake Haven retreat. His pulse quickened. This had to be it. Ethan grabbed his jacket and checked the time, just past midnight. As he prepared to leave, he paused, reconsidering his approach. Should he try to contact the police again? Would they listen now that he had an address? Probably not. They'd made it clear they considered the case closed. Besides, Alexander Vale was wealthy and influential, even after his fall from grace. If he had connections within the local police force, any warning might alert him. No, Ethan would have to do this himself. He would go to the address, see if there was any sign of Celeste, and then decide his next move. If he found evidence that she was being held against her will, he could call for help. He picked up Celeste's phone one last time, looking at her lock screen, a photo of them together on a hiking trip in the Lake District back in England. Her smile was radiant, genuine. That was the real Celeste, not the hollow voice on the phone telling him their marriage was over. "I'm coming to find you," he whispered to the image. "Hold on." With newfound determination, Ethan pocketed his own phone, made sure he had his wallet and room key, and headed for the door. As he turned the handle, he caught sight of their wedding rings gleaming on the nightstand. Celeste's left there while she went to yoga, planning to put it back, on after her spa treatment. He picked up her ring and slipped it into his pocket alongside his knife, then, with a deep breath, stepped into the hallway, ready to find his wife, whether the police believed she needed rescuing or not. The night air was crisp and cold as Ethan exited the Lake Haven retreat. He spotted a taxi idling outside the hotel entrance, the driver scrolling through his phone as he waited for potential customers, even at this late hour. Ethan approached the cab and climbed into the back seat. He pulled out his phone and showed the driver the address he'd found. "Can you take me here, please?" The driver glanced at the address. "Fernhill area." "Sure thing, buddy. Bit quiet." "Out there this time of night, though." "That's fine," Ethan said, settling back in his seat. He kept his GPS app open, tracking their movement through the darkened streets of Queenstown. The town was subdued at this hour, though small groups of late-night revelers still wandered between bars along the waterfront. As they left the town, center behind, the streets grew darker and quieter, houses more spaced apart. Ethan's anxiety mounted with each passing minute. What would he find at Alexander's property? Would Celeste be there? And if she was, what was he realistically going to do about it? One man against Vale, and however many people he might have working for him. After about 20 minutes, the taxi driver slowed down. "We're almost there. Want me to drop you a bit before the actual address? It's pretty dark out here." "Yes, please," Ethan agreed, grateful for the driver's discretion. A few houses down would be perfect. The driver pulled over at a spot where the road curved, about 100 yards from the address. Ethan stepped out into the darkness, the taxi's taillights receding down the road, leaving him alone in the cold night air. He waited a moment for his eyes to adjust to the darkness before proceeding cautiously toward Vale's property. As he drew closer, he could make out a large, modern house set back from the road behind a security gate. The house was completely dark, no lights visible in any of the windows, no sign of activity around the perimeter. It looked uninhabited. Ethan frowned, disappointed. Had his lead been a dead end? He stood in the shadows of a large pine tree, watching the property for several minutes, but saw no movement, no indication that anyone was inside. Then he remembered what Detective Wilson had said, that Celeste was staying at a serviced apartment. He scanned the area around him, noticing for the first time a low-rise building about a block away from Vale's property. Even from this distance, he could see the sign illuminated by subtle ground lighting. Lakeview Serviced Apartments. Could that be where Celeste was? The detective had said they'd checked on her at a serviced apartment. Ethan made his way toward the building, hope surging through him. As he reached the entrance, his suspicions were confirmed. It was definitely a serviced apartment complex, just as the police had described. This had to be it. Celeste must be inside. But how would he get in? The main door required a key card, and even if he managed to get inside, he had no idea which apartment Celeste might be in. There was a concierge desk inside, but it appeared unmanned at this hour. He stood there, indecisive, weighing his options. He could wait outside until morning, hoping to catch a glimpse of Celeste if she left the building, or he could return to Vale's property, see if there was any way to determine whether anyone was actually there. Deciding on the latter course of action, Ethan returned to the dark house. He approached the gate cautiously and pressed the intercom button. After a long moment of silence, he pressed it again. Still nothing. He was about to turn away when the speaker crackled to life. "Who is it?" a woman's voice asked, sounding elderly and irritated at being disturbed. "I'm looking for Alexander Vale," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Is he available?" "Who's asking?" the woman demanded. "I'm an associate from London. I need to speak with him urgently." There was a pause. Then the woman replied, "The boss hasn't been here for a very long time. Go away. It's the middle of the night." "It's very important," Ethan persisted. "When do you expect him back?" "I said go away," the woman snapped. "I'm not giving you any information. The boss doesn't live here anymore." There was a slight pause before she added grudgingly, "If you're that desperate to find him, try the Trout and Tackle down the road. He used to conduct business there before all his trouble started." The intercom clicked off, leaving Ethan standing alone at the gate. He felt a mixture of frustration and hope. A new lead. If Vale had frequented this local bar, perhaps someone there might have information about his current whereabouts. Ethan returned to the road, his mind racing. If Vale wasn't at his Queenstown property, where was he? And if Celeste was supposedly staying at the serviced apartments of her own free, well, why would she choose one so close to her ex-husband's property? He looked back at the apartment building, considering his next move. It was late, and there was little more he could do tonight without raising suspicions, but he couldn't just go back to the hotel, not when he was so close. Across the street, from the apartments, Ethan noticed a small bar with a neon sign still glowing in the window, the Trout and Tackle. It appeared to be one of the few establishments still open at this hour. This had to be the place the housekeeper had mentioned. Perfect. He could ask about Vale there, keep an eye on the apartment building, and see if there was any activity at Vale's property. At the very least, he might be able to gather some local intelligence. With a renewed sense of purpose, Ethan crossed the street and pushed open the door to the bar. The Trout and Tackle was a local watering hole with dark wood paneling, fishing memorabilia on the walls, and the faint smell of beer and cigarette smoke that had seeped into the furnishings over decades. A few patrons were scattered around, a couple of older men at the bar, a group of friends at a corner table, and a solitary woman nursing a glass of wine while reading a book. Ethan approached the bar and ordered a beer from the middle-aged bartender, a stocky man with a salt and pepper beard. "You're not from around here," the bartender observed as he placed the beer in front of Ethan. "No," Ethan replied. "I'm from England, just visiting." He hesitated, then decided to be direct. "Actually, I'm looking for information about Alexander Vale. I understand he used to come here." The bartender's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "Vale? Yeah, he used to be a regular before all that business trouble of his. Don't see him much these days." He studied Ethan's face. "You a business associate?" "Something like that," Ethan said vaguely. "Do you know if he's currently in Queenstown?" The bartender shrugged. "Couldn't say. But if you're really looking to find Vale or learn about his movements, you should talk to Darren Hutchkins. He runs the charter business Vale uses whenever he's in town. Vale doesn't own boats himself. Too traceable, I reckon. But he's chartered from Darren for years." Ethan's heart quickened. This was exactly the kind of information he needed. "Is this Darren a regular here?" "Oh yeah." The bartender nodded. "He'll probably be in tonight. Man has a tradition. Been doing it for 15 years. He glanced at his watch. "Should be here any time now, actually." Ethan positioned himself at a small table by the window, where he had a clear view of both the serviced apartments and the road leading to Vale's property. From here, he could also keep an eye on the door, watching for the arrival of Darren Hutchkins. The beer arrived, and Ethan took a small sip, needing to keep his wits about him. The cool liquid did little to calm his racing thoughts. He felt simultaneously so close to and so far from finding Celeste. He checked his watch, nearly 1 a.m. How long should he wait here? What was his actual plan? As he contemplated his next move, the door to the bar swung open, and a boisterous man in his 40s entered, followed by 3 friends. The man was tall, with a weathered face and the confident demeanor of someone who knew he owned the room. "First, rounds on me, boys," he announced to his friends, slapping one on the back as they made their way to a table not far from where Ethan sat. "Order whatever you want. Food, drinks, the works. Tonight we celebrate." Ethan tried not to eavesdrop, focusing instead on the view outside the window, but the man's voice carried across the half-empty bar. "I just made a damn fortune tonight," the man declared, pulling out his phone. "Look at this. A guy just rented my yacht half an hour ago. Paid double the going rate without even haggling." His friends leaned in to look at the screen. "You sure it's not a scam, Darren?" one asked. Looks like it came from an offshore account. Nah, it's legit, Darren insisted. Already checked my bank account. $200,000 right there in black and white. 200 grand for a week? Another friend whistled. Must be some big shot. That's not all, Darren continued, swiping on his phone. He also paid the security deposit in crypto. Look at the wallet address. Initials AV. AV? One of the friends mused. Could that be Alexander Vale? That rich guy who lives up the block up the hill? Ethan's ears perked up at the mention of Vale's name. He subtly shifted his position to better hear the conversation. Could be. Darren nodded thoughtfully. Had a chat with him in this very bar a few years back. Exchanged numbers, actually. Said he might want to charter the yacht sometime. He shrugged. Whoever it is, I don't much care, as long as the money's good. Ethan couldn't believe his luck. This was it, a solid lead. If Vale had just chartered a yacht, that could be how he planned to disappear with Celeste, away from the mainland, out of cell reception range. They'd be nearly impossible to track. He stood up, abandoning his barely touched beer, and approached. The group's table. Excuse me, he said, trying to sound casual. I couldn't help overhearing. You must be Darren Hutchkins. The bartender told me you might be able to help me. I'm actually looking for Alexander Vale. It's quite urgent. The men looked up at him with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. And who might you be? Darren asked, eyeing him up and down. Ethan hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. My name's Ethan. Vale has taken my wife. The group exchanged glances, and one of them snickered. Buddy, sounds like you've got woman troubles. If she's left you for a rich guy, can't say I blame her. Ethan felt his face flush with anger, but kept his composure. It's not like that. He's her ex-husband. He's obsessed with her. Darren studied him for a moment. You do look like a guy whose wife has gone missing, he observed. All right, sit down. Let me hear your story. Ethan sat, giving them a condensed version of events. Meeting Celeste, her history. With Vale, their wedding, and her disappearance during their honeymoon. He left out the details about Vale's criminal activities but emphasized the man's obsessive behavior. I believe he's planning to take her away on this yacht you've chartered to him, Ethan concluded. I need to know where they're going. Darren looked skeptical. Look, buddy, I feel for you, I really do, but I've got a business to run. Can't go around giving out client information based on some story. Please, Ethan implored. At least tell me if they've left yet. Where's the yacht docked? Darren sighed, then seemed to soften. All right, tell you what, I'm in a good mood tonight with this payday. Let me check with my staff at the dock. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Jimmy, yeah, it's me. That charter for tonight. Have they set sail yet? He listened for a moment. Still waiting for them to arrive. Right, thanks. He hung up and looked at Ethan. They haven't left yet. Yacht's still at my private anchorage in Fiordland. Staff says they're expecting the party to arrive within the hour. Ethan's heart raced. Fiordland? How far is that? About 3 hours drive from here. 2 if you really push it this time of night with no traffic. Ethan stood up. I need to get there now. Is there any way you could take me? I'll pay you double, triple what Vale's paying. Darren laughed. You don't look like you've got that kind of cash, son. But I tell you what, I'm curious to see how this plays out. And if this Vale character really has taken your wife, well, I don't want that on my conscience. He stood up. I'll drive you there myself, but you have to promise me one thing. Anything, Ethan said eagerly. Don't piss off the rich guy too much. I don't want him asking for his money back. Darren winked at his friends. Always knew I'd get a good story out of that yacht someday. Life on this southernmost island can get pretty dull. One of his friends raised his glass to Darren's unexpected night of adventure. As the group toasted, Ethan felt a surge of hope. For the first time since Celeste had disappeared, he was on Vale's trail, and with luck, he'd reach the yacht before it sailed, before Vale could take Celeste beyond his reach forever. Let's go, Darren said, downing the last of his drink. Got my Range Rover outside. We'll make it in 2 hours flat. True to his word, Darren's driving got them to Fiordland in just under 2 hours. The journey had been a blur of winding mountain roads and tense silence, broken occasionally by Darren's casual commentary on the landscape or questions about Ethan's situation. As they approached the private anchorage, nestled in a secluded inlet surrounded by the towering peaks and dense forests of Fiordland National Park, Ethan's anxiety reached a fever pitch. The remote location confirmed his suspicions. Vale had chosen this spot precisely because it was isolated, far from prying eyes. "There's my beauty," Darren said as they rounded the final bend, his high-beam headlights illuminating a sleek white yacht moored at a private dock. The Southern Cross, 76-foot luxury cruiser. Man's paying top dollar for her. Ethan peered through the windshield, his heart pounding. The yacht's lights were on, casting a golden glow on the dark water. Several figures moved across the deck, and standing at the end of the dock was a group of people. "Pull over here," Ethan urged. "I don't want them to see us coming," Darren obliged, parking the Range Rover behind a small maintenance building about 100 yards from the dock. From this vantage point, they had a clear view of the yacht and the people gathered at the dock. "Got some binoculars in the glove box," Darren offered. "Use those." Ethan retrieved the binoculars and trained them on the dock. His breath caught in his throat as he spotted her, Celeste, walking down the wooden planks toward the yacht. She was alive. She was here. But something wasn't right. Though she wasn't bound or visibly restrained, her body language was tense, her movements stiff. Behind her walked 2 men in dark suits, security by the look of them. And there, stepping out of the yacht to greet her, was Alexander Vale himself. Ethan watched as Vale reached out to touch Celeste's arm. She flinched, pulling away from him, but he persisted, placing his hand on the small of her back to guide her onto. "The yacht. That's them," Ethan said, his voice tight with anger. "That's my wife, and that's Vale, the man in the blue suit stepping out of the yacht. Doesn't look like she's going willingly." Darren squinted at the scene. "No, she's not." Ethan's resolve hardened. "I need to call the police." He pulled out his phone and dialed Detective Wilson's number. To his surprise, the detective answered, despite the late hour. "Mr. Mercer, it's 3:00 a.m. "What?" "I found her," Ethan interrupted. "Celeste. She's at a private dock in Fiordland. Alexander Vale has her, and he's about to take her away on a yacht." There was a pause. Then Detective Wilson's voice came back, sharper now. "Mr. Mercer, where exactly are you?" Ethan relayed their location, describing the private anchorage and the yacht. "How did you find this place?" the detective asked. "I did some research on Vale, found his property in Queenstown. Then I met the owner of the yacht Vale chartered. He drove me here." "Mr. Mercer, this is an extremely dangerous situation. You need to stay where you are. Do not approach Vale or his men. We'll deploy a search and rescue team immediately." "You need to hurry," Ethan urged. "They're boarding the yacht now. Celeste doesn't look comfortable at all." "Understood. Police and maritime. Units are on their way, but it will take time to reach your location. Stay hidden, Mr. Mercer. Do you understand?" "Yes," Ethan said, though his mind was already racing ahead to what he'd do if the police didn't arrive in time. After ending the call, he turned to Darren. "Police are on their way, but I don't know if they'll get here before the yacht leaves. Do you know where they might be heading?" Darren scratched his chin thoughtfully. "There's just so many islands separated from the mainland by Tamatea Dusky Sound and Tippewaha Break Sea Sound. Once they're out there, there's no signal, no coverage. Those are remote islands. If they reach one of those, you might not find her for days, maybe weeks." Ethan watched through the binoculars as Vale's security team began removing the mooring lines. They were preparing to depart. "I can't wait," Ethan decided. "If that yacht leaves, we might never find Celeste." Darren grabbed his arm. "What are you thinking of doing, buddy? Those guys look like professionals. You'll get yourself killed." "I have to try," Ethan insisted. I can't just sit here and watch them take her. Darren sighed heavily. You've got guts, I'll give you that. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a small case. Opening it, he removed what looked like a handgun. Here, it's not real, just a replica. Illegal to have real guns here and damn hard to find, but they won't know that in the dark. Ethan took the mock gun, testing its weight in his hand. Thank you. Don't mention my name, Darren warned. I don't want that man chasing after me if this goes sideways. And be careful, replica or not. Those security guys shoot first and ask questions later. Ethan nodded, taking a deep breath. He opened the car door and stepped out into the cold night air. He tucked the mock gun into his waistband, covering it with his jacket, and began making his way toward the dock, staying in the shadows. He approached, slowly, careful to remain out of sight. The yacht's engines had started, a low hum carrying across the water. He was running out of time. When he reached the end of the dock, Ethan pulled out the gun and stepped out of the shadows. The security team was too focused on their departure preparations to notice him until he was halfway down the dock. "Stop!" he called out, pointing the gun at Vale. "Step away from my wife!" All heads turned toward him, the security team reaching for their weapons. Vale's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with contempt. Celeste's reaction was the most telling. Her face transformed with relief and hope. "Ethan!" she cried out, taking a step toward him before one of Vale's men grabbed her arm. "Let her go," Ethan commanded, keeping the mock gun trained on Vale. "It's over, Alexander. The police are on their way." Vale recovered from his surprise, a smirk forming on his face. "Ethan Mercer, always the hero, aren't you? But you're too late. We're leaving, and Celeste is coming with me." "No, I'm not," Celeste said firmly, struggling against the man holding her. "Let me go. I told you, Alexander, I will never be with you again." Vale ignored her, his eyes locked on Ethan. "You should have stayed in your hotel room, mourning your failed marriage. Now you've complicated things unnecessarily." "We kept our end of the bargain," Ethan said, taking another step forward. "We stayed quiet about your dirty business. Why did you do this to us?" Vale's face hardened. "You think I don't know it wasn't you who reported me? One of my oldest partners stabbed me in the back. I lost properties, a significant portion of my wealth." He glanced at Celeste. "But I'm still wealthy enough. And after I lost everything that mattered, I realized what I missed most was her." He reached out to touch Celeste's face, but she jerked away. "When I heard about your wedding, I had to see it for myself. I have contacts everywhere. And when I saw you two there, so happy." His voice turned cold. "I couldn't." "Let that stand. She belongs with me." "She belongs wherever she chooses to be," Ethan replied. "And she's chosen to leave you. Let her go, Vale. It's over." The distant sound of helicopter rotors suddenly filled the air. Vale and his men looked up, momentarily distracted. In that instant, everything changed. Vale's security team, panicking at the sound of approaching authorities, made a split-second decision. Two of them broke away, diving into the dark water to escape, while the others hesitated, looking to Vale for direction. Seizing the moment, Celeste wrenched free from her captor's grip and ran to Ethan, who kept the gun pointed at Vale with one hand while putting his other arm protectively around her. "It's really over now," Ethan said, as the helicopter's searchlight swept across the water, illuminating the dock in harsh white light. The helicopter's powerful searchlight bathed the dock in an almost daylight-bright glow, the thunderous beating of its rotors drowning out all other sounds. In the harsh light, Ethan could see the panic spreading across Vale's face as his carefully constructed plan crumbled around him. Two police boats approached rapidly from the south end of the inlet, their blue lights flashing across the dark water. On the shore, several police vehicles pulled up, their headlights cutting through the night. Vale's remaining security personnel looked to him for guidance, but the fight had gone out of him. As the police boats pulled alongside the dock, officers, with weapons drawn, shouted commands. "Down on the ground! Everyone, Down on the ground now! Vale's men complied immediately, dropping to their knees and then lying prone on the wooden planks of the dock. Only Vale himself remained standing, a look of cold fury on his face as he stared at Ethan and Celeste. "This isn't over," he said quietly, just before two officers approached him from behind. "Alexander Vale, you're under arrest," one of them announced, holstering his weapon and pulling out handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." As Vale was being handcuffed and led away, Ethan finally lowered the mock gun, his arm trembling from the sustained tension. Celeste turned fully into his embrace, burying her face against his chest as silent sobs shook her body. "It's okay," he murmured into her hair. "It's over. You're safe now." A female officer approached them. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, I'm Sergeant Kapoor. We need to get you both to safety and take your statements." Ethan nodded, guiding Celeste toward the waiting police vehicle. As they walked, he discreetly handed the mock gun to Sergeant Kapoor, whispering, "It's not real." The officer took it with a raised eyebrow but said nothing, merely nodding her understanding. Once inside the warmth of the police car, Celeste finally looked up at Ethan, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. "How did you find me? How did you know?" "I saw him in our wedding photos," Ethan explained. "He was there watching us. Then I remembered all the threats, his obsession with you. When you disappeared, I knew it had to be him." Celeste squeezed his hand. "He had someone watching us from the moment we arrived in New Zealand. When that man approached me at the resort, I thought he was staff. But he showed me a photo of my parents, said they would be harmed if I didn't go with him quietly." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Did he hurt you?" She shook her head. "No. He wanted me to choose him willingly, kept saying we were meant to be together, that you and I would never work out." Her voice hardened. "He made me call you, stood right there with his men, telling me what to say. I tried to sound as unconvincing as possible, hoping you'd realize something was wrong." "I did," Ethan assured her. "Nothing about that. Call sounded like you. And you left your phone behind. I knew you'd never do that voluntarily." The drive to the nearest police station was a blur of dark forests and winding roads. By the time they arrived, the adrenaline of the rescue had worn off, leaving both Ethan and Celeste exhausted but grateful to be together and safe. At the station, they were separated for individual interviews. Ethan was taken to a small room, where he met with a different detective than the one he'd dealt with in Queenstown. "I'm Detective Sergeant Morris," the officer introduced himself. "I understand you've had quite a night, Mr. Mercer." Ethan nodded wearily. "You could say that." He gave his statement, recounting everything from Celeste's disappearance to his discovery of Vale in their wedding photos, his research into Vale's properties, and finally the confrontation at the dock. The detective recorded everything, occasionally asking for clarification but otherwise letting Ethan tell his story uninterrupted. "We'll need to coordinate with the Queenstown police," Detective Morris explained when Ethan had finished. "Detective Wilson has already been briefed on the situation." "Will Vale be able to get away with this?" Ethan asked. "He's wealthy, has connections." "Not this time," Morris assured him. "Kidnapping is a serious offense, and with the evidence we have, including Mrs. Mercer's testimony and the fake staff member who initially approached her, we have a strong case. Additionally, Mr. Vale is a U.S. citizen with extensive business interests and possible money laundering operations in New Zealand. There will be multiple agencies involved in his prosecution." The door opened, and another officer entered carrying a small evidence bag. "Sir, we found this during the security check of Mrs. Mercer," the officer reported, handing the bag to Detective Morris. Inside lay a delicate beaded bracelet. Ethan recognized it instantly. Celeste had worn it for months, cherishing it as a gift she believed came from her mother. "Our team found a tracking device embedded in one of the beads," the officer explained. "Very sophisticated virtually. Undetectable without specialized equipment." Ethan stared at the bracelet in shock. "She's been wearing that since about 4 months before our wedding." Detective Morris nodded grimly. It appears Mr. Vale has been monitoring your wife's movements for some time, planning this operation carefully. A cold realization washed over Ethan. Vale had been watching them, tracking Celeste's every move for months, waiting for the perfect opportunity. The honeymoon to Queenstown, which Celeste had said was a generous gift from her old boss, a woman she'd been close to, suddenly seemed far less innocent. Could Vale have orchestrated that too? In a foreign country where he owned property, had deep-rooted connections, and where they were cut off from their usual support network, it all seemed too perfectly arranged. After completing his statement, Ethan was led to a waiting area where Celeste was already seated, wrapped in a blanket provided by the station staff. The moment she saw him, she stood and rushed into his arms. Over her shoulder, Ethan watched as Vale was led through the station toward the detention cells. Despite his handcuffs and the officers flanking him, Vale maintained his arrogant demeanor, a smug grin spreading across his face when he spotted Ethan and Celeste. "This isn't done," he called out. "You can't run from me." Ethan met his gaze steadily. "Yes, we can, especially when you have no money left to chase us with." Vale's grin faltered slightly before the officers ushered him away. Turning his attention back to Celeste, Ethan guided her to the seats. "Are you okay? Really okay?" She nodded, exhaustion evident in her eyes. "I am now." She hesitated, then asked, "Did they tell you about the bracelet?" "Yes," Ethan replied softly. "He's been tracking you for months." Celeste shuddered. "I never suspected. It was from my mother, or so I thought. It arrived in the mail with a card signed from her." She looked down at her bare wrist. "I feel violated, knowing he's been watching me, following me all this time." Ethan held her close. "It's over now. He'll be locked away for a long time." "I'd like to hope so," Celeste murmured, her voice muffled as she buried her face in his neck. A female officer approached them with 2 cups of coffee. "You two have had quite an ordeal. The detectives say you're free to go once transport back to Queenstown can be arranged. Should be in about an hour." As the officer walked away, Celeste turned to Ethan with a tentative smile. "Are we still on our honeymoon? We still have 3 days left, and we haven't even gone flight boarding or cliff jumping yet." Ethan laughed, feeling the tension of the past days finally begin to dissolve. "I think I might pass on those. Losing. You gave me enough of a heart attack, and I imagine the police proceedings will keep us busy for most of those 3 days anyway." Celeste laid her head on his shoulder, her hand finding his. "Surely we can find some time in between to do something fun. We're at the other end of the world, probably the closest to the South Pole we'll ever be. We shouldn't waste it." "Before we make any plans," Ethan said, suddenly serious, "I need to be sure. All those things you said on the phone, about regretting our marriage, about us having different interests." He swallowed hard. "None of that was real, right?" Celeste lifted her head to look him directly in the eyes. "Not a single word," she promised. "I've never been more certain of anything than I am of us. Vale made me say those things, trying to make you give up searching." Her expression softened. "But I knew you wouldn't believe it. I knew you'd find me." Ethan pulled her close again, overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. In the span of a few days, they had weathered a storm that would have broken many couples. They had faced down a dangerous adversary and emerged stronger. As dawn began to break, over the mountains of Fiordland, casting its golden light through the station windows, Ethan and Celeste sat together, planning not just the remainder of their honeymoon, but the life they would build together, a life free from the shadow of Alexander Vale. In the quiet of the early morning, with Celeste's hand warm in his, Ethan suddenly remembered something. He reached into his pocket and pulled out her wedding ring, the one she'd left on the nightstand before heading to yoga that fateful morning. "I think this belongs to you," he said softly, holding the gold band between his fingers. Celeste's eyes widened, filled with emotion as she looked at the ring. You brought it with you? I couldn't leave it behind, Ethan said. Just like I couldn't leave you behind. He took her left hand gently in his and slid the ring back, onto her finger, where it belonged. The simple gold band caught the morning light, gleaming as if brand new. Celeste stared at it for a moment, then intertwined her fingers with his. Perfect fit, she whispered. Just like us. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I love you too, she replied, squeezing his hand. Always. Outside, the sun continued its ascent, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day, a fresh start, and the promise of countless more days together, stretching out before them like the vast, beautiful landscape of New Zealand itself.